Hey, Inebriates, before we get into today's podcast, I just want to give a shout out to today's sponsors. Sponsors make this podcast happen, and, without them, we wouldn't be here. So we just want to say thank you to them. And this episode is presented by Wild CBD. Wild produces the best tasting edibles on the market using real fruit and all natural flavoring, with flavors inspired by the Pacific Northwest, high quality ingredients, real fruit, and consistent dosing. Wild has become one of the leading cannabis edible producers in the country. Wild's new CBD line currently offers real fruit-infused gummies in blackberry, huckleberry, lemon, and raspberry, and CBD-infused sparkling water in raspberry, lemon, blackberry, and blood orange. Blood orange, I love that flavor. So each gummy is dosed with 25 milligrams of CBD and can be purchased in a bottle of 10 or 20. Wild CBD is offering our listeners 30% off their next purchase from wildcbd.com. That's WYLDCBD.com by using the code POD. That's code POD for 30% off your next purchase. Wild CBD products are intended only for the use of individuals age 18 and older. Wild CBD products should only be consumed as directed on the label and should not be used if you are pregnant or breastfeeding. All Wild CBD products are made with ingredients containing 0% THC. Consult with a health professional prior to using Wild CBD in combination with any medications or other dietary supplements. And our second sponsor for today is our good friends at Pretentious Pickles right here in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Pretentious Pickles. Damn it, man. They pickle everything. No matter what kind of vegetable you like, they pickle it. And beyond vegetables, they even do things like cranberries. It's all delicious. It's all hand cut and prepared right here in Plymouth, Massachusetts. They make just the best stuff. They have a store here locally, or you can go to pretentiouspickles.com and place your order online. And they're located at 190 Water Street in Plymouth, Mass. And make sure you check them out. I gotta say, man, I'm a big pickle fan, and their product is just fantastic. So thank you again to both Wild CBD and Pretentious Pickles. And now we're going to jump right into the podcast. Welcome back, Inebri-arts. This is Andy, the Inebri-art podcast. And, we've brought someone back on relatively quick he was only on just a few months ago, but Michael Grecco is back on the show because he's got a new book out called Punk, Post-Punk, New Wave, Onstage, Backstage, and In Your Face. Welcome back to the show, Michael.
Thanks, man. Thanks. It's great to be here. I want to thank our audience for coming back and listening. It was probably about 6 months ago.
Yeah, I think so. It was like towards the beginning of the summer. I'm trying to, we were just saying how time is kind of lost all meaning. I can't remember. It seems like it was so long ago, and it's been very weird.
Yeah, but I think you're right. Time has been tweaked with given COVID and everything else. So.
And where with the shutdown and everything, I was kind of recording podcasts to fill my boredom time. So we recorded so many in advance. It's like one would come out and I'd be like, oh my god, I feel like I talked to that person 3 months ago, and it was 2.5 or something like that. But
right.
Yeah. So we talked briefly last time you were on that you had this book coming out. We wanted to get you back on because it's very Boston forward. So tell us a little bit, just the basic rundown of what the book is.
So the book is the early part of my career, is sort of the unseen early part of my career as a photojournalist. I was a student at Boston University. I went to the School of Communications there, and I was studying photojournalism because I just thought it was exciting and, see the world, that sort of thing. And I was about to start an internship with the Associated Press in 1978, and I was about to start an internship with the AP, and it was the blizzard of '78. So I skied into the Associated Press office. Not really skied. I put on my boots and all my ski clothes and goggles, and because people couldn't get around the city. I brought in 2 rolls of film, and I actually started my internship 2 weeks early and started stringing for the Associated Press. At night, I was a club kid. I lived in a dorm down the street from Kenmore Square, the zoo, they used to call it, 700 Com Ave. And I wandered into the Rathskeller one night in probably 77, 78, and saw the Boston Battle of the Bands at the time. This band, La Peste, won, who were like a cult band of Boston. Still an interesting band. And I was blown away from the music. So you had these 2 things that coincided at the same time. You had me working for the Associated Press as a stringer, covering the State House and photographing Dukakis, almost every day, some sort of press conference with the governor, but getting trained by really good photojournalists for the Associated Press, David Tenenbaum and Chip Morey. While that was going on, I was, a club kid, sex, drugs, and rock and roll in the clubs, enjoying the music. So, I carried my camera, and that gave me access. And the access just made it, made the experience, really interesting. I was hanging out with bands. I started eventually getting assignments for Boston Rock Magazine and WBCN, the commercial station there at the time. And I had access to all of these people, and I hung out with Adam Ant and Billy Idol and The Clash and recorded it all. So that's the gist of the book. It's a series of unseen work. It's a series of unseen work from that time.
So you're working an internship, going to school and to the clubs. I mean, did you ever sleep? I don't. How did that even work? Or did you sleep in class?
I was doing an internship. Well, it was an internship. I forget whether it was for credit or not, but I was freelancing for the Associated Press. So I was a stringer and would pick up assignments. I was in school, and I was a club kid all night, and shooting out all the time. It was aided by drugs.
Drugs and youth.
It was drugs. It was aided by drugs of the drug of the time, cocaine. So it was like. But eventually, I took a year off from school. And so, with the 2 summers together, that becomes like a year and a half. I took a year off, and I realized if I didn't go back and finish my junior and junior and senior year, I'd never finish. And I felt like I should have a degree behind me for whatever I wanted to do. So, that's what I did. I went back, but I did take a year off and, shot both, day and night, just more often and all of that. So it was a wild time.
So you said that you carried a camera with you and that gave you access. Was that more like people assumed you were press, or, because
I actually
were like, send me the pictures kind of thing, or like, how did that work?
No, I mean, first of all, I was part of the scene. So, I was part of the scene. So I was hanging out. I was dressing the part. I was, doing the drugs. I was definitely part of the scene, with the local bands but then, I was assigned by Boston Rock to cover Adam Ant. So I spent the day with Adam Ant, when he went to WTBS, which was the MIT station, which is now WMBR. Ted Turner actually bought the call letters. So I would hang out with Adam Ant all day, and I'd photograph him. Then I'd be with him, on stage at the Paradise, and then, I think it was those assignments that gave me, like the assignment for Boston Rock or the assignment for WBCN, that gave me, the access because the record company had approved it and the publicity department knew about it, and I was not some like out of place photographer, I dressed the part, I looked the part, I was the part, and I hung out. I knew the music. There were many nights where I had the two drummers from Adamant's band in my place playing records, drinking all night, doing drugs. Used to do that with Billy Idol. He'd come to town. I'd get a call from his road manager. Billy wants to see you tonight. Blah 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 blah, and we'd hang.
That's cool.
It's like, I was definitely into the music, and I think that helped, and not like a fanboy, but seriously, knew it, into it, that sort of thing.
Well, it's a level of sincerity that I think you hear it a lot about it today, especially with people who create online content. If you're not sincere about what you're talking about and what you're really enjoying about it, then it shows right away. And it sounds like you sincerely like the music, you sincerely like the scene, and it sounds like that carried you a long way.
Absolutely. So.
And then once, I'm assuming once you were seen a few times with, Adamant and Billy Idol, that you ended up building up a reputation for yourself. So it was like, to go on in kind of thing, wave to the front of the line.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we knew, just even before I was shooting a lot, we just knew every doorman, the Lyons brothers who ran Spit and Metro at the time. John Lyons was at the door, or Tommy, and they just knew you. They knew you were the regular. They knew you were cool. Yeah, I had my black cowboy boots on and tight jeans and leather pants and leather jacket, and I looked the part. I came dressed to be part of that crowd, and I think that that's appreciated by a club. I think that that's appreciated, and we knew every doorman we got in. We usually, sometimes we paid a cover, sometimes we didn't. We never paid a cover to Spit. I had a Spit VIP card, which I'm sorry I got rid of all of that stuff at one point in my life. But we had access to begin with, because we were part of the scene. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the hanging out, especially with the local bands, was upstairs at the Rat was this amazing restaurant, the Hoodoo Barbecue. Our friend Jimmy, Jimmy was a written up chef in Esquire, and we would be upstairs at the Hoodoo eating barbecue every night until Tuesday was there, and the Fuegos were there until Fuegos were there, and that was part of it. Johnny Angel from the Thrills, and every band sort of had a beer there, hung out, grabbed food there some nights. I happened to be there more nights than not, but we were definitely part of the scene.
And the way your book is laid out, it's kind of broken down by each venue. And the one that kind of struck me strange is the Cape Cod Coliseum. I had never heard of it, and then I started asking people around. They're like, "Yeah, how have you not ever heard of the Cape Cod Coliseum?" I don't know how that just missed me entirely, but can you tell me a little bit about it? Because I was trying to decide if it sounded like a really cool place to see a show or a really terrible place to see a show.
I mean, I don't remember the venue that much, but the times I was at the Cape Cod Coliseum, man, it was I was very close with Oedipus, who was, started the show, the Demi-Monde, at WTBS, and then they expanded that into the Late Risers Club, which was every weekday from 9 to 12. And all the famous punk DJs at the time, new music DJs, Tammy Heidi, Albert O, Greg Riebman, Tom Lane, Tony V, Carla Nolan, they all had a spot. I think Albert O and Carla Nolan shared a spot. So those were the DJs. And then on a 10-watt station, I mean, I just heard this story because we did a virtual book signing with Book Soup with Oedipus. On a 10-watt station, Oedipus the Demi-Monde, got a Nielsen rating, and he had numbers.
Yeah.
So they wanted to bring him into WBCN to mix things up, and he insisted on becoming program director. And I was doing PR shoots for WBCN because I was part of the scene for David Bieber, who was the head of promotions, who is a dear friend and still a dear friend. And so Eddie would be like, Eddie had a Mazda RX-7. He's like, I got 2 tickets and backstage passes to Joan Jett. I'll pick you up in half an hour. And I think that's both how my excursions to the Cape Cod Coliseum was. He wanted a day date and called me up, and we'd go down. And I had shot The Clash at Bonds, so I was hanging out with them again, and it was kind of cool. Like, it was low key because I was hanging out with them the last time at Bonds in New York. The Joan Jett thing, we were hanging out with Joan all day backstage. I did some portraits of her, and I think she didn't have very smooth skin, and her manager was like really. I don't think that's the case now, but I think it was the case back then. And I think her manager, Kenny Laguna, was just very. This is before retouching in Photoshop or easily retouching things.
Yeah.
And Kenny Laguna was very protective of Joan. I think the story is, she lived in their house with his wife, and they took her in, and, he was really an on-hands manager. And I told Oedipus the other night, he made me ship him the portraits I shot of her for approval, and he took a pen and punched a pen through her face of every image.
Wow.
So I mean, every one of these days out was an adventure. It was just an adventure,
Yeah, that sounds crazy. Was there one band that maybe wasn't like the most famous or maybe the best band, but was the most fun to hang out with?
I always had fun with Billy. Billy and I were friends at the time. The guys from Adamant were friends. Everyone was cool. Johnny Lydon, every time I photographed him, and I photographed him on multiple occasions, I went down to a studio in New York to photograph him. I photographed him in Boston when they played at the Channel, when Pill played at the Channel. And he's a provocateur. He would just say stuff and do stuff just to, like, try to rile you up or act the part of a provocateur. But almost everyone was really nice. People like you can almost anticipate what people were like. David Byrne was very quiet and shy. Like, Johnny was very loud and kind of wild. It's like.
So that's not an act on his part. That's just who he is.
I think it is an act.
Really?
Honestly, I think it is an act. I think that's his on-stage sort of presence, right? That's his, be wild and sort of a dickhead.
Yeah.
But I've always come to photograph him, and then my next experience with him a year ago, was when I was one of the executive producers on the series Punk on Epix.
Yeah.
And we were at the opening, the premiere night, and he ranted on and had an argument. If you go to my site, daysofpunk.com, and the documentary section on the last nav, because there are 4 bars, and the last nav, there's a little video I shot, because I'm sitting in the front row with the other couple of executive producers. John Varvatos, one of the other executive producers, is like doing a panel, and John just starts railing at Marky Ramone about, and Marky's like, if it wasn't for us, you'd be selling fish and chips in some stall in the, in the Chelsea market in London. And he's like, if it wasn't for us, and John just loves the craziness and spotlight. But then one of the line producers of the show who got friendly with him was like, oh, I just had the most quiet, lovely conversation with John, But my experience is always going in and with a writer, and he has to be Johnny Rotten, not the quiet John Light,
That's really interesting. So the thing that kind of really struck me, because I'm a huge fan, Fred Schneider from the B-52s are at the Ford for the book. How did that come about?
He did. You know, a lot of Elmo. So many nights out, I was with Jim Sullivan of the Boston Globe, who was I believe he became the music critic after Steve Morse left. But Steve Morse was there, and Jim was like a freelancer, and Jim handled all the, you know, the edgy punk bands. Steve handled the big bands, you know. If you're going to write about the Rolling Stones, Steve would get that because he was the editor of the section, and Jim would get like, you know, this band The Cure is coming into town, or this band, you know. So Jim and I were hanging out all the time. He had a girlfriend that I wound up dating. Like we knew each other. He was always there. He was always there, and I knew him because I wound up dating his ex, Emmy Malone, who worked at the Globe also. So, and I just, you know, you date someone's girlfriend, you ex-girlfriend, you get a little backstory. I'm just like, you know, it's like I was friends with Jim, and I invited Jim, especially of all the people, music critics, to come and write about it. You know, being there, knowing the scene, knowing what's going on. Jim, you know, Jim, and then Jim knew Fred, so we invited a couple of people. I tried to get David Byrne to do it and didn't get a response through his publicist. So, you know, sometimes these things just, they happen and they flow, and you know, once Abrams said yes a year from this past September, or August, you know, and we got on a production schedule in November or December. It's like you're on a production schedule, man. It's like, you know, they're looking at pictures. I've got to hire someone to write text. I'm trying to get, you know, the celebrity forward, and I didn't, and Jim tried, and then Fred said yes, and we, you know, you just kind of jump on it. But you know, I think Fred's brilliant. I think the B-52s are brilliant. It was, you know, it's hard to convince someone to do it forward, but he did it, and, you know, we're thankful he did it.
That's cool. So if you had a time machine and could go to any club, whether it's open or not, what is the best place in Boston to see a show?
I don't know. You know, it was all about the music, right? So it was all about the music. Bradford Ballroom was a great space. I mean, I had some incredible situations. I would be shooting the Buzzcocks all day, and for whatever, I'd probably Boston Rock, and I'd be at CBS with them, and I'd photograph them. There's a picture in the book through the window of the booth, and the four of them in the booth drinking beers at like 11 o'clock in the afternoon, in the morning. You know, and then I went back to their hotel room with them, and I did a portrait of them with Pete Shelley in the foreground and Steve Diggle and the rest of the band through the mirror, right? So, so I would have this incredible experience, and then a buddy of mine worked at MIT in the media library, not the media lab, but where basically the AV room, right? Yeah. And he had the first video cameras. So Jan would be there set up to shoot the Buzzcocks at the Bradford Ballroom, their first performance ever in the United States, and I would grab a camera, and I was on stage, and I would shoot. And the same would happen with The Cure. I mean, we're at the Underground. The Cure, it's the first concert in the United States. They can't even get into the club because they don't have IDs that show they're 18 years old.
Oh, my God.
One of them has to borrow my New York State driver's license, which the New York State driver's licenses didn't have a picture on them at the time. Yeah. So somebody had to grab my New York State driver's license just to get into the Underground because they served alcohol. Yeah. And we're like making sure the band gets in there, and then I didn't photograph them with a still camera, but I was on stage with them, photographing, doing video of them. So there's a couple of videos that are not part of the book. There's a couple of there's this rich part of my life at this time that's written about and talked about in the book that's not in pictures, but it was always about the band. I mean, a great venue is the Bradford Ballroom, but it was always about who you were going to see and how much you were into them, and we were really into all of them. It's like I actually wish that I had shot the Smiths. I wish I had shot the Psych Furs. I wish I had shot the Simple Minds, but they were all great shows.
So I can imagine it has to be challenging to shoot with them on stage because you want to get a great shot, but I mean, I would assume you don't necessarily want to block the audience either. Is there a trick to that?
You first of all, you don't want to be center stage because you try not to get a microphone in somebody's face. It's always good to be off to the side. And, you're conscious about what you're doing there, but the people in the crowd have to assume that, there is press coverage, or if the band's agreed to be videotaped, that there's video coverage and so on and so forth. Like, that's just part and parcel of the whole thing. So I don't remember much trouble with the crowds, other than, getting knocked around in the scrum.
Well, it's punk music.
Well, that was only bad. That was really only bad with the Dead Kennedys because Jello would throw himself. Those shows at the Channel it was always a rough crowd at the Channel.
Yeah.
It was a very, the English Beat at the Boston Opera House was cool. That's a great venue. Love the English Beat. Bradford Ballroom's not quite as sophisticated as maybe the Boston Opera House or the Orpheum. Paradise was, you can have a bite and a drink, and the Channel was rough. The Channel was Southie, and the Channel was like a serious crowd. I, often got my car window broken and my car stereo ripped out of the car and that sort of thing.
And so this is, late 70s through the 80s. This is not the time of small, compact digital cameras. I mean, how much equipment did you have damaged, and was that like a real, challenge? And how did you handle all that?
I didn't have anything damaged. The equipment didn't get damaged. The car got broken into at the Channel a lot, but nothing got damaged. As I said, I was being trained by the Associated Press. There were some amazing photographers. Chip Morey was a 5-time military photographer of the year award winner. He was a Navy. He documented the Navy SEALs. He was a Navy SEAL himself. He was a Navy SEAL himself and documented the team. He was, he did photography for the team. So, I carried. I think I started my career as a Canon F1 user with and that gear was huge and heavy at the time. There was nothing small about it. So I had a couple of F1s and maybe a couple of AE1s, the smaller plasticky Canons, and then an assortment of lenses and a couple of Vivitar 283s. And as you would shoot for, you were doing the same thing, but with different subject matter during the day. So I was honing my skills, and my 283s, those Vivitar on-camera flashes, you'd stick up in the ceiling, and I had a white card. It was actually a piece of translucent frosted white plexiglass. So if I tilted the light up into the ceiling, I could put that card there, and it would shoot some light forward. Mm-hmm. So a lot of these backstage portraits are just, on-camera flash taken off camera, bounced into the ceiling with either my fingers or that card there to pump some light forward. With the B-52s, it was just me with no assistant. They were coming off stage. I set up a piece of seamless paper. I was supposed to shoot them for Boston Rock, but I literally set up a small piece of seamless paper. I taped it to the wall. In Photoshop, for a lot of these pictures, we actually extended it like a couple of inches because it wasn't wide enough to cover them top to bottom.
Yeah.
So, but I literally put a strobe and an umbrella over me. There were people walking on and off the stage. I grabbed them at a wall, before they went backstage, where I knew there'd be a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I shot six frames, 8 frames, 4 frames, 5 frames, whatever it is, and they walked off. It's like a lot of this stuff was very run and gun, impromptu portraiture.
And I suppose when one of the people that is kind of passing knowledge to you was embedded with the Navy SEALs, you can't complain about getting knocked around in a club.
Yeah, I mean, Chip was in the Vietnam War, so it's like he was good friends with Eddie Adams, and he told me he was part of a group in Vietnam, TWAP, Terrorized Writers and Photographers. So, we definitely hear some stories. So, from those days too, Nikki Utt from the Associated Press. I knew through Chip. I knew Eddie Adams. I've had, for those of people who know my sort of magazine celebrity produced portraiture over the years, you have to realize the first 13 years of I started late. The first 13 years of my career was as a news photographer and a photojournalist. Even when I moved to LA to work for People magazine, I was doing photojournalism for them. I really wasn't doing portraiture of any kind.
So, I mean, it's a gorgeous book. Did you digitally touch up any of the photos, or is it just kind of that's how they were? Or how was the process?
Well,
how's the process of putting out a book in 2020?
You know that you scan something, and the goal of the scanner is to read all the information on the film, which means that you have a very flat negative, very flat, scan, right? So you have to tonally adjust them. I actually, I had this interesting process. Like, we use one of the companies in India, but they hand carry the stuff from San Francisco, where they have an office. They have a U.S. office. So I started scanning. We used to have someone in our office that scanned all day, high-end scanning, and it just wasn't cost-effective because it was so slow.
Yeah.
So every once in a while, we would take a big box. An editor would come, edit stuff out of the files, and we'd ship it to this Indian company and get like 16-bit high-resolution scans for 70 cents a scan. So we started that, and we started the project that way. I'd send them to a guy I used in Brazil, and he tonally adjusted them, and he made this kind of gritty dirt layer that he put on the images, and to rough them up a little bit and to give them a little grain, and not that they really needed them, but he made this layer that he called dirt. And it wound up, though, the dirt was like on people's faces and bodies and stuff like that. So when we were in production, my in-house retoucher came in, and it was just cost effective because the guy in Brazil, who was less money, did the first pass of everything. And then once the publisher picked the images, the only retouching we did was taking the dirt off of people's faces because it looked like they had scratches and stuff on them, and pulling it back. She made what he did very subtle, but then it's like, all right, so you do all of them, then you look at all of them, then you make a test print to send to the printer. Then you look at all the test prints and go, no, this one's way too dark. No, this one's too light. Then you do another round of test prints. Then you get it to where you like all of them. Then you send the images to Hong Kong, where the printer is. Then you send the images to Hong Kong. Then my archivist is looking at old Boston Rocks online because we wanted to register the copyright, and you have to do that with the very first published images.
Yeah.
So, and then we're looking at the Boston Rocks going, man, these pictures are better. This picture of David Byrne is better than the one in the book. And this picture of Lux Interior, he's got the microphone shoved in his mouth, all the way in his mouth. And this picture of Lena Lovitch is pretty cool. And this is it. And we were like, we had to do last-minute drum scans, very expensive. I always scan 16-bit for anyone who knows that part of digital photography, the highest color information and tonality information possible. So we're doing, like, before we got everything, we're doing another round of scans. Then we had to do another rush round of scans. Then we found these Boston rocks, and then right up until the moment of press, like we're supposed to deliver the book, we are scanning images, and we delivered them right, and we cut them out of the Boston rock. She temporarily dropped them in, and then we were switching them right before it went to press, and then we still switched like some files as we were getting proofs back. And we did 3 rounds of proof. I mean, there's color in black and white in the book, and unless you put them in separate sections completely, you have to print the black and white as 4-color ink. And we were very picky with the printer, and we sent the proofs back 3 times, wound up doing our own CMYK separations too. We converted everything and sent them back, and then that finally was the trick. Their color conversions were not very, their conversions from RGB to CMYK were not very good.
It's such a process, it's like, I don't think, especially nowadays where print is, I feel like it's kind of a dying art form. I don't think people really think about how much really goes into something, like that. It sounds like it's quite a process, but it also makes me think of the number of times I've had artists who've shown up with paintings at art shows and they're like, "Don't touch it, it's wet."
Yeah, right. No, it's true. I mean, this book's been a 4 or 5 year process. I mean, my archivist Michael Parker, who started pulling the images from that period out of my archive, going, "You have to do something with this. You have to." And we started thinking about it. We started scanning it. We started showing it to people. I walked it into my friend David Fahey at the Fahey Klein Gallery. He helped me edit some work. We scan some more work. I mean, I had a publisher in the UK, and this guy, I asked him for something. It's like, "Hey, can we do this or whatever?" And this was a pay to play situation. And he told me I was difficult, and he decided at the very last minute, after we were supposed to have the book out, I was supposed to have the book out last year, he said, "Now, you know what, I've decided not to do the book." And I'm like, "What?" So I was speaking to my friend Danny Clinch, who introduced me to Michael Sand at Abrams, and they loved it. I mean, the nice thing is that, and we've put a lot of effort into the publicity, and hopefully we've got a really good seller, a best-selling book. We made the New York Times gift book guide. We have an article in The Guardian. We have press around the world. It's been really nice. So
that's awesome.
But it's a long labor of love doing these things. They're not. You don't do them for the money. That's for sure.
So now, under normal circumstances, I would assume you would go on a book tour and do signings like you talked about. And you said you're doing them virtually. Is there a plan that when you can to do the kind of run-of-the-mill, fly out to New York, do a book signing, that kind of thing?
I think by the time we can do a book signing, you wouldn't be doing any more book signings.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we've got 5 or 6 galleries lined up around the world. I've got the Struck Gallery in Toronto, and the Michael Foley Gallery in New York, and the Atlas Gallery in London, and the Photography Gallery in Sweden. And I've got all these galleries. I've got the Hewitt Gallery in Arles, France. I've got all these galleries around the world. And the Struck Gallery has a show on the books for March, but I don't know if that can even happen, So that'll be, I'll be there and sign books, but the promoting the book will be over, and it'll all be about the show at that point, and we're just waiting. It's a very strange time to set up shows, because the Foley Gallery closed. Michael Foley closed his gallery, I believe, and he's not going to do a gallery. He's not going to find a new space until COVID's over.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
which makes sense to me. Why support a physical space? You can sell online. It's like.
Yeah, why pay overhead when you don't have to and no one's coming in?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Of course.
So are you the type of person that is kind of like, okay, promotion, then I'm going to relax, or are you already thinking ahead to your next project?
Well, you know, the second lighting book I did had a lot of my portraits in it, but
Mhm.
I'd really like to do a proper, second half of my career celebrity portrait book, and I'm hoping this book is successful enough that that'll help it matter with a publicist because they know you have a following and stuff like that. But that's down the road. I mean, I'm working on a docu-series on photographers. I'm working on a reality television show. I have 3 startups. We still do large advertising shoots when requested. I've always got a million projects. It's like no one no one does anything at the speed I do it. So it's okay to have a lot of projects
Yeah.
because they all take time. Like it all takes time to get the paperwork going and to get financed, and like they just all take time. And I'm I work really hard. I put in 10-hour days most of the time, and it's a little more crazy now because of doing all the publicity for the book. But I like being busy, and I like I like it when things work out and are successful, and that often takes effort.
Yeah, I mean that sounds very similar to me. I'm the kind of person that likes to have multiple things going on because if I just have one, I can get bored with it. But if I have like 2, 3 projects or more, then it's like you're always you can jump from one to the other and kind of back and forth, and keeps my mind busy. And it's not been a year for busy minds as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But
No.
yeah.
No. It's true.
So I
Great.
just want to say thanks for coming on and talking to us. Where can people go to find the book? I assume it's on Amazon, and I mean,
It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble. It's in all Booksmith. It's everywhere. If you want to see some a handful of spreads from the book, you can go. So the book title, to our wonderful audience, the book title was developed by my editor, Garrett McGrath, who's a wonderful editor, and it's very descriptive,
mhm.
but it's not one to make a great URL.
No,
So
that's a very long URL.
So the book title is Punk, Post-Punk, New Wave, Onstage, Backstage, In Your Face, 1978 to 1991. The website for the whole system, including the fashion, we have some T-shirts and stuff like that, is called daysofpunk.com. So they can go to Days of Punk. There's the book section, and when you hover over the purchase book, it gives you options of where to buy it. Anyone from our brilliant, wonderful, incredible audience listening today, if you buy it from Amazon and can write a review, it would be appreciated. I will send you a book plate, which is a signature card that you can either stick inside the book or just put it in the leaves, and you'll have a virtual signed book. So
Oh, that's cool.
that's actually how we're doing it. We're doing it
Yeah.
with book plates, which are like these mailing labels that we send out to people. So
Now, you said there's clothing that goes along with this. I would that I
yeah,
would.
it's a whole system. So it's
Yeah.
like one section of the Days of Punk site is the book. In that section, there'll be a collector's edition book too. We'll
Hmm.
offer with fine art signed prints, 8.5 by 11 prints. The next section is all the images available as fine art prints. The next section is clothing. I partnered with Image Club Limited, and we have a Days of Punk brand, which will start out with T-shirts, but hopefully it'll go into a whole fashion line. And then the last section is from the Epics documentary, but it just shows that documentary a little bit, and what some interviews with me from that documentary. And then if this docuseries happens, and there might be an episode about me and my punk imagery. If there is, we'll replace the epic show with my show. So, but it's trying to be a cohesive brand of offerings with the images. So
That's awesome. So for our listeners, again, that's punk, post-punk, new... Oh, I can't even talk. Punk, post-punk, new wave, on stage, backstage, in your face, 1978 to 1991. So, run down to your local Amazon and check it out. And Michael, as always, this was an absolute pleasure. Anytime you got something going on, feel free to shoot me an email. We'll get you on.
I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the audience here today, and I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
No problem, man. You have a good rest of your weekend. And we'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to today's podcast. You can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art or on Instagram at Inebri-art6. You can email us at Inebri-art@yahoo.com. And make sure you listen to the other podcasts on the Inebri-art Podcast Network, including Bar Talk, Old Colony Cast, Retro Redoctopus, America's Hometown Horror Podcast, and our newest one, Theme Park Legends, a podcast about working at theme parks. What else? And we'll catch you again next time.